Hey, my babies, and welcome back to season 2 of With Love and Butter, a chef's podcast on self love and romance and all the food and drinks that get us through it. I have missed you guys so much. This has been truly a hell of a year, right? And I feel like so many things have changed. Y'all know I usually do my introduction. I'm your host, Courtney Futch, chef, culinary creative director, author, storyteller, formerly single, lover girl out here in the dating world, and somebody who has now been happily partnered for just a little over a year. So through and through, I feel like in all of that, a couple of things kind of remain true. Really is always this love for love. And you might have noticed also that the tagline changed because I won't necessarily be talking about dating and relationships in the same way anymore, but I will tell you what we will be talking about. So I feel like I should backtrack a little bit here. I started this podcast in the summer of 2022. And I did that in order to chronicle my then single season and to give myself a softer and more playful place to kind of land the experiences that I was having in dating. And y'all know that I was telling more fun stories, I was telling more sad stories, telling stories about being ghosted, telling stories about being a damn ghost. And at the place that I was in, I just wanted a place to kind of put all those stories, tell them in a way that felt like neat and and kind of gave honor to where I was at in my own life at that time. But we've gone through nearly a full season of like me in that single era. Season 1 has like 14 or I think 15 episodes, a couple of bonus episodes got sprinkled in there. And we have covered so much ground together. But then, y'all, something happened in February of 2023. And I went on a first date with a man who you all have come to know as B. And by March, me and B were serious. And then by April, me and B were planning on my eventual move back to my hometown of Atlanta so that we could be together. That's also where he lives. And by August, I was moving out of my Charlotte apartment and into our townhome, which if you're watching this on YouTube, then you're seeing our big ass, green ass living room gallery wall situation. By the way, if you're not watching this on YouTube, please go watch it on YouTube. Baby Girl just got monetized very recently. So if you're going to listen anyway, you might as well just like listen and, like get the occasional ad or something like that. I'm done begging now. But now it is March of 2024. So it's over a year from that fated first date. And my life has changed so much. And in so many ways, I can clearly identify that it's been for the better. And while so much of what's changed in my external life has been underscored by my public romantic relationship with B, so much of what's been harder to capture is the work that I've been doing on my romantic relationship with myself. Loving another person on the journey to being more deeply loving with myself has brought up a lot of stuff. My relationship with my family, my relationship with my body, my mind, my art, my career, my sense of placement in the world. Big changes, very little time. And all that change has required a longer season of silence than I anticipated, and certainly a longer one than what I'd promised you all. So before we dig in, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. I say all the time that I could not have dreamt up a more lovely community of listeners and also readers of the With Love and Butter newsletter. I wasn't sure where any of this was going to land when I first got started, and now, almost 2 years later, which is insane, I feel so safe. And I also feel free to share my world with you all. But you all also share your worlds with me, the emails and the DMs and the comments underneath my videos. And when we pass each other out in the real world, I am so thankful to you. I am thankful that you feel seen by me too, that you offer gentle critique, that you apply what works for you and you leave the rest, spit out the bones where necessary, and that you're here. I could not have done any of this without your chorus of loving voices. I thank you so much. Now let's get active, shall we? Y'all know that this would not be a true With Love and Butter episode without a cocktail pairing. Y'all know how I am. Y'all know how I get down. You know that I love a little drinky drink. And I have been having a lot of fun playing around with more artisanal kind of craft cocktails during the downtime, in between seasons. And this drink is an apple cider mezcal margarita with a brown sugar and tahini rim. I feel like apple cider just kind of doesn't get its just due outside of the fall, but I love the warmth that it adds to a drink. And I prefer the kind of muddy flavor of an apple cider over like the clarity of a straight up apple juice. I feel like apple juice just like tastes like whispered apples. You know what I mean? It's the same way that I feel about LaCroix. But anyway, this cocktail has a dash of fire from cayenne. It's got a little bit of ginger. It's got cinnamon, and it's also got a little bit of nutmeg and black pepper. And of course, the smoke from the mezcal. So this feels like a really perfect way to kind of kick off a season after having said so little in the last several months. I wanted a drink that has something to say because I too have something to say today. So cheers, my loves, to returning. Thank you for being here with me. I love you so much. Let's get into it. What a good drink. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm ready to get to it. I don't know about y'all, but let me start off by saying that I have not totally finalized what we're going to be talking about this season. There are no more dating stories to tell you, right? My love and I are happily settled into our partnership, and I think that that means also keeping a lot of things just for us. And as we move into the next phases of our relationship, like engagement and marriage and children, I don't know just yet what from our little family will be available for recording in the way that I've done it in historical seasons. I'm trying to figure out what feels okay for me. And I think as a result, also trying to figure out what is going to feel okay for us in this relationship that you and I have established with one another. As you all know, most of my musings have been written instead. And it makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of process through them. I have more time to kind of write a draft, write a second draft, shoot it off into the world. And it still allows me kind of the cloak of anonymity of being a writer where people are not hearing me say these words and where the words feel final, but they don't feel damning. Right. And because so many of you have asked, a couple of questions, I think, is a recurring theme. I've realized that there are some things that I do feel more comfortable talking about as I'm moving through this next season in my life and have been moving through the season for the past year. And the main thing that I feel like as a theme y'all wanted to know was what has it been like sharing a life with someone where other people can't see it, right? Like I pretty much as immediately as B and I moved here into our home together, it's not so much that I didn't have a desire to share. It was that I wanted to be really careful about what I was sharing. And I've never been someone who really believed in like the evil eye or people wishing, not well over you. Like I don't really resonate with that necessarily. But I did feel like while we were figuring things out, there were some things that I wanted to have the grace to do and to give myself that grace and allow him and I to figure out what our new dynamic was without feeling like we were adding extra eyes on top of it. And a couple of the themes that really seemed most pertinent were about the change that comes with moving in with your partner and ultimately what that means for your relationship. And so now that we're settled in and we got our lives together, I have a lot of insight to share. So if you haven't listened to all of season 1, even if you just haven't listened to like episode 13 and the bonus episode, which I think was 14, then you might not know all of the context around what transpired in, the desire to move to Atlanta, how B and I arrived at that decision making. But it's a robust kind of thought exercise that we had kind of gone through, and I talk significantly in more detail about it in a previous episode. So feel free to go and check that out if you haven't already. But to do a quick recap here, I moved down to Atlanta at the end of August. And I got asked a lot during that time if anything about that process was like scary. And the honest answer to that question was no. It wasn't a scary process for either of us at all. That conversation for us started in April after we'd gone out to dinner with a couple of friends of ours who were married but had been together for like many, many years prior. And it was kind of interesting, I think, that I had made the choice to move to Atlanta over B coming to Charlotte. Now, he had offered, and his willingness to like pick up and move his life out to Charlotte since I was already settled there, I thought was really endearing. It was one of like the very early kind of tender things. But the way that I kind of, one, Atlanta is home for me. And then two, I didn't really have an extensive desire to stay in the city of Charlotte for a long period of time. My mom was there, so like Charlotte is home, but Atlanta is my hometown. I grew up here, my friends are here. I'm rooted here in like a very different sort of way, but also creatively, it made a lot more sense for me to be here in Atlanta for the projects that I'm working on, for the work that I do. Charlotte isn't necessarily a city that has the sort of creative industry to support all of the different types of creatives, particularly in the food world, that are in it. And that's okay. I loved Charlotte. Charlotte gave me everything that I needed for the season that I was there. But the move back to Atlanta felt like all roads just kind of led here. All the roads led here. Grammar, Courtney. And it also made a lot more sense for his career as well. Moving to Charlotte, you're automatically going to see a crazy pay cut. And Atlanta just offered a lot more like career mobility, right? We go where the money resides. And so we just both made that decision that Atlanta was a better place for us to go. But I always really appreciated the fact that B was just so willing to like pick it up and move it to Charlotte and figure the things out with me. Now, our game plan was pretty solid by June. So, during which time we were asking ourselves all manner of important questions from a book that was recommended to me by my mentor, Jeff. And it's this book that was written in 2004. It's like very archaic, not gonna lie to you, and traditionally Christian. But I bought it because he recommended it and because I really trust my mentor and care about him a lot. That he recommended we, start practicing and answering these questions with ourselves and for each other, called 101 Questions to Ask Before You Get Engaged. Now, this is important to note because we had already gone to look at rings for the very first time in April. So, shortly after this, we're like, okay, cool, like let's start to mentally prepare ourselves with no specific date in mind for engagement and think about what all of these things are going to look like. So, there was like, by the time I'd even recorded the episode where I announced to y'all that I was no longer single, he and I had already gone to go look at rings, which is kind of insane now when I'm saying that back out loud. But we start taking ourselves through the journey of this book, and we're putting aside the more archaic elements and figuring out what applies to us, and of course what doesn't. And we were surprised, I think, to find that we'd already asked ourselves so many versions of these questions, by the time the book had even gotten to us. So we'd worked our way through it over phone calls or dinners or voice notes or, just like late night pillow talking. So while we were doing all this work to kind of prepare ourselves for an eventual engagement, we're talking more about what it looks like for us to live together, what sort of space we'd want, what sort of things do we think we'd need in order to feel like happy and not smothered, right? I'm an only child. He's been living on his own for many years. And that was a really considerable consideration for us, is what is it going to look like for us to kind of share this space together? And eventually in July, we do end up finding our place, this townhome. And it's in an area near where I grew up. And it all felt so certain and settled. And we trudged through the paperwork so that we can get to the fun part. And then B moved in at the end of August, but a week before I did, so that I could go back up to Charlotte, pack my life up, and bring it all home to start a new one with him. And I will say that the thing that surprised me a lot, right? Even after I'd recorded that episode saying that, like, okay, like I'm packing up my things. This is the last podcast in the apartment. The thing that shocked me more than anything was that leaving Charlotte was so much harder. And I imagine it was because of my mom and my sense of peace and my girl pad that had no trace of a man in it up until B. And I'd really enjoyed, I think, the transformation that I myself had gone through as like a girl who was like in womanhood and then also on my way back to it, right? But then right after that, and y'all might have seen that there was a newsletter talking about this, which is that I'd lost a big ass box with all of my childhood memories in it, all of the photographs, all of, to shoot my social security card, my grandmother's obituary. I'd lost all of these things that were in a big container in the midst of the move. And I didn't realize it until it had been about a week right? And so I'm already here now in Atlanta, and I'm noticing that this thing that I've been actively archiving and keeping since I was 16 is just now no longer with me. And I felt gutted, right? All of the joy that I had felt in the lead up to moving in with this man, all of the excitement, all of the send offs from my girlfriends, and all of the conversations that I was having with my mom, and all of the conversations that B and I were having together about just like this joy, all of it felt like it turned to grief so quickly. And it was such a scary experience for me because it felt like a death. I'd lost a few people like in the last few years, and it felt like losing the last of my memories with my grandmother. It felt like losing whatever memories I had with my mom's mother, who's still with us, thank God. But it all just felt so raw and empty. And then I grieved in no particular direction for so long that it was hard to hold the happy up to inspect it, to remember that I had prayed for it, to remember that the love had finally come to swallow me up for good and for goodness. But I couldn't stay swallowed for too long. I had to tend to the grief. And I love my man, but he could not materialize my childhood for me. I love myself, but I could not uncrush the box in the Charlotte Municipal Landfill. I love my life, but the archives of all of it are gone. And that was so hurtful that I felt like I could not breathe for weeks. And so, right as I was starting a new life, I was grappling with the fact that one had ended. And every single memory and every single moment of my single season would be behind me now. And I didn't feel like I'd said enough to July Courtney to prepare August Courtney for the undertaking of making a new happy life with someone. So now we're here in the house, and I'm working from home and building an agency every day. I've been remote since 2020. It's all I know anymore, except when I traveled for work. And I'm surrounded by things in a house that need doing. And I have this insatiable urge to decorate and design and print and paint and hang art. And B would come home and see the changes and help me make more changes. And I'd start cooking dinner at 4 p.m. so food would be hot when he came back home, the way I'd seen my mother do it. And he'd wash the dishes, and we'd watch some episodes of something on the couch and go to bed early, which I've never done before until him. And we repeated this cycle. It was the stuff of, I think I like this little life. And then the bedtimes would creep out later and later to 1 a.m., which was his compromise for me, the night owl. And we'd go to bed, and tomorrow I'd cook after a day of working and creating content and start dinner at 6, not 4. And then he'd wash dishes while I went live on TikTok. And then we'd watch a movie or go on a walk or talk about work, or we'd grab drinks with friends and then come home and go to bed around 1 a.m. again. And then other times we'd travel to a wedding or a baby shower or a funeral or to visit family or host at our place. Our life at the end of last year felt so full and fun and big, and still bubbling up under it was all my grief. And then my breaking point came in November, weeks before Thanksgiving, 3 months into the move. My mom came into town and saw me struggling to balance the new world I told myself I wanted for years. It was what I'd prayed for, but I was not prepared to do my ugliness in front of someone else all the time where they could see me. And mostly I felt guilty that I couldn't fulfill what I thought I'd promised him, a life of domestic sweetness and fun playfulness and sexy delight, and that I couldn't make it look like that for myself either. I felt like I could have done more work to align my vision and my reality if I wasn't trying to outrun this sticky sense of loss. Eventually, I admitted as much to him, and unsurprisingly, although unexpectedly, B met me with the grace I should have been giving to myself the whole time. He had no expectations of me. All that imaginary labor was mine to own in the end. And here's the thing that this process has taught me. Someone who loves you truly will hold you accountable to your grieving process, will encourage that you do it, that you spend some time with friends to heal from it, that you work at a coffee shop to get outside of it, that you invite your mom down to sit inside of it. You can be loved through the stickiness, even up close, especially up close. The time since has been splendid. While we figure out how to own the best parts of ourselves and let it reflect in this home that we're building, I'm glad to be so well loved. We spend more time asking curious questions, checking in on our mental load, cooking together, eating more kale, eating a lot more kale, getting invested in Blacklist on Netflix, and staying in touch. It felt like we went into a cocoon to renew our dynamic for a sustainable kind of happiness. I do like this little life. And now we have more desire to pour elsewhere now that our cups have been restored. And now A girl is back in therapy, and I'm working to find ways to honor my inner child and also my inner grandma in my almost 30s by telling more truths in every direction, but my way, softly, romantically. So, what is there to share now? Where to go? Where to land myself? I guess back to where I started long before there was ever even a podcast to begin with, to get back in conversation with myself just out loud again. And to focus on the food, focus on the music, focus on a good drink, focus on the little world I'm building and the big world I'm sharing in, to focus fully on the senses, on sensing, on sensuality, and on community, and on words, and Beyonce, of whom I am a fan, but not necessarily a stan, and she rocked my world anyway with a song that she dropped right after the Super Bowl, a song called 16 Carriages, which hit me right in my upper girlhood because we've never heard her acknowledge hers, or the lack thereof it, in this way, and it forced me to reckon with mine. The song stuck on me like raw manuka honey, clung to the ribs like grits, and then I heard the Maxwell Fortunate 16 Carriages mashup, and it felt like one of my mama's favorite songs, shredded me apart like tender braised pot roast. It helped me to grapple with the losses I've experienced since 16, reckoning with what I thought I'd be like versus who I am now at 29. I feel so grown and also deeply undeserving of the adult moniker. Who let me grow up so fast? I'm just a girl still. And also, never honored the girl in me so that I could let her pass into womanhood. Maybe I was only ever young. I took it to the pen so I could process. Can I read something to you? 16 carriages driving away while I watch them ride with my dreams away to the. Courtney, you're in therapy again. I am sorry in advance. I tried. It is 11:26 on a Sunday night. The main floor is still heavily scented from a pot roast that went into the oven at 2 and was eaten at 8. The weighty aroma of umami blankets the house in caramelized onion and roasted garlic. Smells like meals your mother made before you left for school at 16. Smells like rich, dark soy and Worcestershire, a splash of crystal hot sauce, and brown sugared carrots. The empty glass of a once Sauvignon Blanc calls out from the kitchen island. It didn't pair when you poured it at dinner. It doesn't now either. You grab a glass anyway. You have just dipped your toe into the true trenches of womanhood, whatever the hell that means, and it is lonelier than you had hoped for everything you gave up to get here. You likely are the problem and can't see it past your intentions, your busy schedule, your dreams of building something so personal out in the public. Your personal is all so public now. Did you mean for it to look that way when you started? You were a tender, bleeding heart of a thing once, still are, but quieter, shorter, and more intense, concentrated like beef stock in low heat after hours, gelatinous like that same stock after a long chill. Nothing sticks. Instead, it all absorbs. I know you. Melted away to a gentle unctuousness like the faintest pat of butter. The mouthfeel is tangible and still could be easily missed. You were a sensitive observer of the world at 16 years. In the business of grown folks, you were so obvious and also so deeply overlooked. Your mother mothered, and your father, he parented, and no one can tell you what you were like as a child, as a girl. You were never a girl, though. Maybe you were only ever young. It's been umpteen summers and I'm not in my bed. On the back of the bus in a bunk with the band. Going so hard, gotta choose myself. You don't sleep much, or very well, never have. And especially not in the winter. It is January of 2023. You are up late again, watching Scandal, and furiously cutting the headlines out of Ebony, Elle, and Essence. You're in want of representation, imagery that's brown, buxom, and bubbling over. You haven't seen yourself yet, I think, not clearly. Only ever something close. Floating softly from the laptop speaker is the refrain from Robert Glasper's Better Than I Imagined, and it makes the room feel fuller. As the weight of rose gold scissors glides through thick, glossy paper, once for silhouette and then twice for sharp edges, you find a small paper cut on your left index finger. The work you've done to feel safe for yourself is notable, and still, the tiniest things get to you. You have gone looking for yourself in the fine print again. Sweet girl, there is only a drop of blood. $16, working all day, ain't got time to waste. I got art to make, I got love. Picture it. Sicily, 1922. You haven't done an uncomplicated thing in your entire life, I think. You're riddled with thoughts you wish you did not need to say or write or type. It is a fruitful compulsion, but you are compelled begrudgingly to tell people the things you write about them and the things that you think, too. Your therapist noted in Thursday's session the sadness that sits on your left shoulder, a muted red intensity hovering just slightly over your bosom. All the now happy doesn't take away the then hurt, you snark back to her, and she chuckles. She knows that neither of you deserved that. You know, too. Love is bringing up all the ugly you buried, you sweet girl. Future planning has catapulted you backwards to 2002 to revisit a smaller Courtney, to remother her before it is too late, to let her play, to dig in the dirt. Safety will not absolve you of the need to get messy, to chase and be chased on the playground. When is the last time you ran with nowhere to be? Your head has been down in a book or in bakeware for 5 years straight, 16 to 21. It paid for school and still cost you everything. You were rarely social, not deeply connected, not fun. Maybe you were only ever young. Been 38 summers and I'm out in my bed on the back of the bus in the funk with the band. Going so hard now I miss my kids. Overworked and overwhelmed. It is the year 2000. You have declared to an audience of teachers that you'll be a chef when you grow up. Like my mom. Your mother reminds you later at home that she does not see herself as a chef. She just cooks well. Love is more than the Thursday spaghetti nights you held on to from the house on Octandra Court. It was the only romance in your childhood home. You will use the small details you remember to craft a skeleton love for yourself, and you will impose whatever handsome flesh finds you onto those bones and call that ribcage home. You knew so little then, and I wish someone had told you just how much you had not seen. I wish someone had told you what you should have seen. The world was not at home with you. It just cooked well. You do not know what romantic provision and protection look like. Not yet. You will learn it eventually when you are 28, under the loving umbrella of a warm man from Atlanta. He will know you to be sad some days and love you anyway, and other days will love you for your sad, and you will love him dearly and want to give the world to the person who met you in all of your effort and also stayed, who loves you the way that you do, like fragile art. And you will also know that this love is the consequence of letters you wrote at midnight, and the hundreds of close friend stories, and the thousands spent in sessions with black therapists, and so many bags of hot McDonald's french fries, and tearfully telling your mom that you needed more than spaghetti night dreams to cling to if you were ever going to understand how love could look. And it also took her hearing you. It is a late August morning, days after your 29th birthday. You have packed up the very last of your belongings from your colorful apartment in Charlotte. You have said your goodbyes to girlfriends and clinked endless glasses to your new adventure. You are at home for the night in your mother's house, in a room that will always be yours. As the golden sun breaks through the clouds over the trees in the backyard, your mom will tell you, finally, what you were like as a girl. Over coffee, she will tell you who you've been the whole time. There is no difference, independent, curious, empowered, and always worried. It will be just hours before you drive to Atlanta, but this time as an again resident, to share your newfound womanhood with a man you trust. And you will not be able to pull out of the driveway to leave her. One day you will understand that you were never hard to love. You were just asking the wrong questions. Got love to create all this holy night. They won't dim my light. All these years I fight. It is 11 a.m. in Barcelona. Last November, days after your favorite holiday, you are in a heavy slumber, jet lag, naked. Next to your lover, two weighty tangles of chocolate limbs, feet jutted out of the cool white sheets for temperature regulation. Looks like a thicket of roots so under each other that there is no over, and your head is on his chest or back or arm. You are where his heart beats at and where the heat is. A knock from housekeeping wakes you up, and you'll gather yourselves, untangling from the warmth to go explore the city. Right off from Le Meridien is the street most known for pickpocketing, and off you'll go with intentional, newly naked hands stuffed into your own pockets. You do not know if the good people of Barcelona like butter. It has not tasted like it. It all lacks soul or salt or spice, lacks home. You need acid, but all there is the memory of heat. And all the day's search for flavor will be fruitless even after a Michelin meal. Your reprieve, an emotional anchor from across the Atlantic Ocean, is found in a 2 a.m. bodega run with your love. In the bitter cold of Barcelona's empty streets, a familiar blue bag of salt and vinegar chips, and you remember. A sour bite is still a familiar blessing. You will lose so much of yourself in a year, much of it on purpose. Your corporate work, your girlhood, your address, your damn mind, and some of you will get misplaced by accident. A large plastic bin with the fullness of your teenage memory, everything you've kept since you were 16, and a few friendships with it. And you will grieve in no particular direction for a while, and then one day you won't. And you'll make a Sunday pot roast and pair it terribly with Sauvignon Blanc. The air will perfume, thick with freshly cracked black pepper and whole cloves of garlic. The marbled fat of the chuck roast will crackle and pop and whistle. The onions will go translucent and also brown at the edges. The beef bone broth will splatter from clumsy pouring. The dark soy will bubble at the rim of the pot, and you will cover the dish and let her simmer before transferring to an oven the way that you taught yourself. The way the 2000s Courtney made promises to herself to learn to do. The way that 16-year-old Courtney promised she would also. The way the 28-year-old Courtney practiced and then perfected. Maybe, baby girl, you were only ever young. Now my cup clean, but still won't fall. Still working all my life, you know. Only God knows, only God knows, only God knows. Woof. Okay. So as I'm sure you can imagine, the heaviness of this piece has sparked so many conversations in my own life with B, with my therapist, with God. I feel clung to like the wet spot on a t-shirt after washing dishes. I feel raw as hell. And at the same time, I also feel very hopeful. And I feel ready to figure out what else bubbles up underneath the surface. And I want this podcast to be a place and a space. I've gone as far as I can alone. And everything that I'm learning about love at this point in my life is through the lens of community. I, at this juncture, have no idea where the podcast is going to go, how it's going to take shape beyond the fact that I want to cook for you and with you. I want to talk about yearning. I want to interview guests at the intersection of love and finances, love and religion, love and friendship, love and entrepreneurship. I want to talk about how I'm building something that scares me and how I am afraid, truly for the first time ever, in the process of building my creative agency. I want to tell our stories about the messiness of becoming and the tenderness of caretaking and making homes out of our bodies, especially the bigger ones. I want to ask more curious questions, and I want to do it over a meal, in between sips, in between belly laughter, with no shoes on, up on the couch, and I want to do it with you. Now, while the storytelling element of today's podcast is over, you know that the podcast itself, the episode is never done until we get into the meal pairing and the wine pairing and the song pairing, okay? If you've been around for a little minute, you know exactly what the vibes are, and I'm sending you off into the universe with good tidings and hopefully something that makes you like really excited to go and cook something, which is, in my mind, the most delicious pot roast on God's green earth, okay? So this meal pairing is really unctuous and like heartwarming and kind of has that stick to your rib quality, but it doesn't make you feel slow or heavy. And it's a soy tomato braised pot roast with melting onions and brown sugared carrots. I really like this dish because it has a lot of the elements like I really enjoy, particularly with meat, a slow braised meat. You're going to get an onion in there. You're going to get some aromatics. You're going to get your carrots. For me, they're just kind of there to bulk up the rest of the meal. I don't even really eat carrots for real, but the carrots are good, don't get me wrong. And it's just like so delicious. And most people don't cook their pot roast with soy. They tend to do some sort of like gravy, but I feel like the soy and the Worcestershire and the little dash of hot sauce and some balsamic vinegar also just help to really make for a super tender meat. I absolutely love it. So for the wine pairing, I'm poking a little bit of fun at myself from the way that I paired the last pot roast that I made with Sauvignon Blanc because that was what we had at the house, okay? But I actually kind of like the idea of being a little fringe here and suggesting a white wine to go with a beef. I really love a Chenin Blanc. South African wine. It's kind of crisp, it's minerally, but it's also got like enough acidity to cut through the fattiness of your pot roast. I like a more well balanced sort of meal, and I feel like a super like a deep red wine is just gonna like kind of overwhelm my taste buds personally. So I'm gonna recommend that you try it out. I really, really do love it. And the Chenin Blanc also balances out like the brown sugar note from the pot roast as well. So it's really, really fun. And it gets the job done beautifully. And this episode's song pairing is surprisingly not 16 Carriages. I was gonna make it Fortunate by Maxwell because it's one of my mama's favorite songs and it reminds me of my childhood. But I actually came across this week a song that I really like called Imperfection by Baddaman Cerk. Baddaman Cerk. It's a 1 minute song. It's very, very brief, but it's a cute little banger, and I kind of really like it. It's like for the girls, you know. But anyway, all of these songs from this season and season one can be found on the All Is Paired playlist on Spotify and on Apple Music. It's linked down below in the description. My babies, this has been such a joy. It feels so freaking good to be back here and talking to you. I have missed you, my babies. I've missed me, my baby. And I'm really looking forward to everything that this season has to bring. I'm curious to hear what sort of things y'all kind of even want to hear about. Feel free to drop that down into the comments. Like, if there are any other thoughts that you have, any other topics that you want covered during this season. I feel like this is very much like the People's Podcast. And then the people that Courtney might end up talking about some stuff that had nothing to do with what you asked me to do, but we will eventually get around to whatever it is that you have questions about. So I'm gonna go ahead, call it quits, finish off the rest of this drink, and I love you, babies. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. Mwah! Bye.